On the morning of January 21st, 2006, the unimaginable happened. Jane McKeough, a woman in her late 30s, vanished from her home in Sydney without a trace. Everything had seemed normal until communication with her suddenly ceased. Her family tried calling her several times, but her phone was switched off. Anxiety began to rise, as if something dark was surrounding her fate. The next day, the police launched a search for clues about her whereabouts, but it was all in vain. The questions grew louder. Was she alive? Had she been abducted? The uncertainty was mounting with each passing hour. As the hours passed, the search intensified. The police scoured the streets of Sydney, looking for any leads that might point them in her direction. Everyone was certain that this was no ordinary disappearance. It was a crime with something far darker behind it. All the evidence pointed to something sinister. First, the surrounding areas near her house were combed for any signs, but nothing was found. Meanwhile, reports started coming in from witnesses who claimed to have seen Jane's car in different places, but the details were vague. Worry began to creep into her family's hearts, who anxiously awaited any updates. After several days of relentless searching, the police were on the brink of losing hope when Jane's car was found in a remote area, far from where anyone would have expected it. The car was parked in an unfamiliar spot, the doors locked, and everything appeared undisturbed. But the strangest thing was the complete absence of Jane herself. This discovery left the police in a state of confusion and bewilderment. Had Jane left the car herself? Or was there something else happening behind the scenes? This moment became a pivotal point in the investigation, pushing the police to rethink everything and question if she had been kidnapped or if something far more complex was at play. With the discovery of the car, the police expanded their investigation. The theory of abduction began to gain traction. Investigators followed every possible lead, from the missed phone calls to any evidence that might reveal the identity of the perpetrator. However, the answers weren't as straightforward as they had hoped. There were no signs of forced entry into the car. No blood traces, nothing that would suggest an abduction in the traditional sense. Could Jane have left voluntarily, or was the crime more intricate than it first appeared? These questions stumped the investigators, and with time running out, it felt as though the case would remain unsolved. In the days that followed Jane's disappearance, the toll on her family became painfully evident. Jane's mother had broken down in grief, while her brother remained in denial. Everyone waited for news, hoping for any breakthrough. As the days passed, doubts began to pile up. Was Jane the victim of a murder, or had something more sinister happened to her? Her family wasn't the only ones left in suspense. The entire city of Sydney was gripped by the mystery of the woman who had disappeared without a trace. These moments were the hardest anyone could endure. Finally, after weeks of exhaustive searching, the news came that left everyone in shock. Jane's body was found in a remote area north of Sydney, in a place no one had anticipated. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine the cause of death. The discovery hit her family like a crushing blow, especially since they had started losing hope. Yet, despite the devastation, finding her body marked a new turning point for the investigation. What had happened to her? How had she ended up in that place? These questions were just the beginning, and the police began to examine the evidence with even more scrutiny. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the police began to gather the evidence carefully. While everything appeared unclear, there were details that needed to be examined. Some tissue samples were found at the site, and traces that could prove useful. However, the investigation was still in its early stages, and the evidence was scant and inconclusive. Everyone wondered, would they ever solve this mystery? Or would Jane remain an unknown victim, her case filled with unanswered questions? The answers began to form, but the path to the truth would be a long one. By early 2007, the investigation took a new direction. Evidence was sent to forensic labs for in-depth analysis. DNA testing was one of the key pieces of evidence that had been collected, but it would take time to find a match. The police were confident that, if a crucial piece of evidence was found, it would be in the forensic analysis labs. During this time, Jane's family felt a flicker of hope, but anxiety still haunted them. Would they be able to catch the killer? The crime, which initially seemed random, was growing ever more complicated. Despite progress in analyzing the evidence, the police struggled to identify the perpetrator. There were potential suspects, but none of the evidence was strong enough to definitively tie anyone to the crime. The investigation took a more complicated turn, with the police focusing on examining hundreds of suspects, but they couldn't narrow it down to the actual killer. The following period was filled with challenges, as the evidence continued to pile up, but the case remained unsolved. In 2007, a new step was taken with advanced DNA testing techniques. This marked a new dawn in the investigation, as collected samples from the crime scene were sent to advanced forensic labs. Hope grew stronger that a match would be found, but results would take time. Meanwhile, the police remained optimistic that the truth would soon emerge, but lingering questions persisted. Could DNA reveal the identity of the killer? And what if there was no match at all? Years passed in the investigation, and the focus shifted to testing thousands of DNA samples. One of the major challenges was finding a match with someone who had any connection to the crime. But it wasn't easy. The process involved screening hundreds of individuals, but no matches were found between the DNA samples analyzed and the suspected individuals. The investigation took a sharp turn, and the pressure on the investigators mounted as the case threatened to go cold. In 2011, the police began receiving information about an unknown individual who might be linked to the crime. This news brought a renewed sense of hope. The evidence still remained incomplete, but new leads were emerging, potentially unlocking the key to solving the case. Suspicion grew around this person, and with it, excitement surrounding the investigation revived. Who was this person? Could they be the key to solving the crime? New questions arose, and the excitement surrounding the truth grew as more details began to surface. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Investigators found a precise DNA match from one of the pieces of evidence collected at the crime scene. This DNA matched a person who had been previously examined, sending shockwaves through the investigation. This moment marked a critical turning point in the case. Thanks to scientific analysis, the killer was now within reach, but how would they capture him? In the summer of 2012, the primary suspect was arrested after DNA evidence confirmed the match with the evidence gathered from the crime scene. The person, who had been examined before and had raised suspicions in 2011, was now in police custody. With the arrest, the crime began to unfold in more mysterious and complex details. Who was this person? Did they have a strong motive for killing Jane? The moments following the arrest were filled with tension and anticipation. By the end of 2012, the trial of the perpetrator began. His confessions were deeply affecting to Jane's family and everyone following the case. The trial revealed that the killer had planned the crime meticulously and had been operating in the shadows for a long time before committing the murder. After a lengthy trial, the killer was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Jane McKeough. For her family, while the truth was painful, the trial offered a sense of closure after years of torment and uncertainty. The horrific story came to an end, But the big question remained: how could ordinary people commit such inhumane acts? Source: the story is documented in the Australian Police Archive for 2006, with updates in 2012 following the DNA discovery and identification of the perpetrator.